Welcome to the Long Range Planning Committee meeting for Block W in Crystal City. I'm Jim Lantelmi, chairing this meeting tonight. Welcome. We'll be holding a hybrid public meeting tonight, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted July 7, 2022. Members of this LRPC subgroup for Block W are participating both here in person and virtually through electronic means. So at this time, I'd like to orient us to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting is going to be run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the LRPC webpage or the project webpage or the county's events calendar, or the email notifications sent to LRPC email subscribers. There is also a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use that. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. And please keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I'll address when it's appropriate to turn it on in a bit. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes. One is for LRPC subgroup members who need technical assistance, and two, for members of the public to add their names to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of this meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussions. Those who are planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve as that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. This meeting is being recorded. If subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of this meeting, please turn on your video feed and raise your virtual hand in Teams. We'll monitor the video feeds that are on as an indicator of who'd like to speak. If subgroup members are participating by phone, do we have anybody by phone? No, we don't have to talk about that then. For members of the public who'd like to provide feedback and comment about tonight's meeting, for our members of the public who'd like to do that, you will be called on to speak at the end of the meeting and will be allotted 2 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. Speaking time allotted is usually dependent on the number of speakers we have this evening, but I think we can assume 2 minutes is okay. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat for virtual attendees, or provide your name to the staff with your name if in person. The staff's over here if you're in person here, and you'll be added to the speakers list. And finally, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting, as I mentioned, is being recorded and will be posted to the county website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. That concludes the opening remarks. Why do we first, before we do anything else, go around the room and introduce who's who? As I mentioned, I'm Jim Lantelmi. I'm chairing the meeting tonight. I'm a member of the Planning Commission.
Eric Berkey, member of the Planning Commission.
My name's Tony Streiner. I'm with the Planning Commission.
Bob Benson with the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission.
Laura Navia with JBG Smith. I'm the development manager for Block W.
Galina Pazrastas with Morris, JBG Smith.
I'm Matt Allman with Venable Land Use Council. Leah Sarli with the Planning Commission.
Sally Peterson, Planning Commission.
Nick Giacobbe, Aurora Highland Civic Association.
Evan Heim, Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
For SLAT Transportation Commission.
Sergio Garcia, Arlington County.
Matt Tuzek, Arlington County Planning Division.
Chrissy Walentish, Planning Division.
Yes.
Jake Grumman with Grove Slate, transportation consultant for the applicant.
Please work on Grove Slate.
Andrew Tchaikovsky, SK Bank.
The other thing to remind everybody, when you're speaking, speak up. The microphones are up here, and that way our virtual people can actually hear what you're saying. So make sure you talk. You don't have to use your inside voice. Why don't we move then on to the staff's presentation for this meeting? We have one more person who came in. Introduce yourself.
Hi.
Thank you. Okay, staff, it's all yours.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. All right, so we are here to look at the block plan for Crystal City Block W. Prior to the outline for staff's presentation for this evening, we'll look at the purpose of the block plan, the location of Block W specifically, existing conditions on the site, sector plan guidance, the applicant's development proposal, deviations from the sector plan, and next steps, timeline, and schedule. You can see in the illustrative concept plan from the sector plan that Block W is located in the shaded area. We'll have a little more information on that, so I'll keep going. Okay, so just to review, the purpose of the block plan is to allow for planning analysis at the block level and helps to ensure that Crystal City develops consistent with sector plan vision. Proposed new building does not preclude future planned improvements. Systems and infrastructure continue to function during redevelopment, and focus is maintained on timing of community improvements. Just to summarize this slide, what is a block plan? It's a general long-range plan for a single block in Crystal City, and this is for properties that are east of Richmond Highway. Tonight, we're just looking at, again, at very general aspects of the block plan, mostly related to open space and transportation. There will be a corresponding SPRC process after this LRPC process, which will include more site-specific recommendations. And this block plan is required because, again, it's east of Route 1 in Crystal City and is required by the sector plan. Okay, so for tonight, and I want you all to interpret this loosely, we want to be working, LRPC should be working towards determining whether there is either A, general consensus that the proposed block plan meets the sector plan goals and is ready to inform the SPRC, or B, the consensus that there are major issues and outstanding with the proposed block plan. So this is not black or white. One's not meant to give a green light for the project, and the other is not meant to completely put a halt to it. But generally, we want you all to be thinking of one of these two options while you review the proposals tonight. Okay, so looking at the block plan location, it is in the South End district within the sector plan. It's east of Richmond Highway, as we discussed. It's north of 26th Street, south of 23rd Street, and it is identified as an anticipated redevelopment site in the sector plan. The existing conditions, this is the site of the existing Crystal City sand volleyball courts you all may be familiar with. There is also a additional workout features and a workout park on this site. There is a service road that cuts through mostly the center of it. It runs from north to south or south to north. And there is an underground tunnel that connects to a parking lot that JBG owns and manages and maintains, and it's used for construction worker parking. So we can look at that in more detail. Photos of the site. So going clockwise from the upper left of the screen, you can see the sand volleyball courts. In the next image, you can see the exit ramp of the airport access road that is above grade, and it comes to grade as it comes to Crystal Drive. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see that airport overpass. Again, it's elevated, and that's the service road that's going underneath it. And then in that lower left-hand image, that's just an aerial of the situation of the service road as it connects to that underground tunnel that I mentioned that goes under the railroad tracks, as well as the construction worker parking on both sides of the railroad tracks. Okay, so for the development proposal, it's rezoning to CO Crystal City block plan, as we looked at, and why that's required. A site plan amendment to remove some of the site area for Block W from site plan 167, and as well as a new site plan for a 7-story mixed-use building with 370 residential units and about 3,000 square feet of ground floor retail. So looking at that in a bit more detail, if you could read that from here, just some of the development tabulations of note here. It's a parking ratio is about 0.5 spaces per unit, and there are the proposal includes provision of open space of about 35,000 square feet. Okay, so moving into sector plan guidance for the building heights map, the sector plan actually permits a maximum building height of 200 feet here. The proposal is at about 85 feet, so it's not a deviation from the sector plan guidance, but it is a strong, there's a large difference between the proposed and the recommended. Looking at the bulk plane angle map, there is no recommendation specific to the site. For the build 2 lines, the sector plan does show a 115-foot building face-to-face distance. However, at certain pinch points, 98 feet is permitted. And then for street network, you can see there is a type A retail-oriented and mixed-use oriented arterial street along the Crystal Drive frontage adjacent to the project site. Okay, for tower coverage, the sector plan prescribes 85% of the net buildable area. And for land use mix, residential, commercial, hotel, or mixed use. Public open space, you can see there is a open space. It's hard to see from here, but that's public open space number 13 in the sector plan, which is Crystal Park on a slide that follows this. A bit more detail on that. And then for retail frontage, there, the northwest corner of any proposed building on Block W does require retail on that location. Okay, looking a little more at the open space, you can see the illustrative plan from the sector plan as well as some of the policy requirements, which includes meeting a minimum open space area of 38,000 square feet. This site also currently includes a childcare center playground, so we will have to discuss the relocation or the reincorporation of that into the park at some point if that's decided. And then the active uses was mainly recreational for the park use. Okay, looking at base density, it's 1.5 for commercial, 72 dwelling units per acre, sorry, 1.5 FAR, then 110 units per acre for hotel uses. Again, this is a residential and commercial mixed use project proposing. And then looking at architectural features, the sector plan prescribes a coordinated frontage on the northern facade facing the open space and an architectural feature on the south. And looking more closely at that element, you can see the sector plan defines or describes an architectural feature as something that can range from a special corner treatment to a complete building tower. And then a coordinated frontage is described as something that should mutually respond in massing materials and architectural language to visually unify the common space or street they frame. We will be discussing both of these aspects more at the SPRC level, since they are more architecture and site specific. Just want to flag it for you now. That is the recommendation sector plan. Okay, looking at surface transitway map, the sector plan does envision a a proposed transit stop in the northwest corner of Block W. And then looking at the service and loading map, the sector plan does identify the eastern frontage, which is the side of the building that is adjacent to the railroad tracks, as the generally preferred frontage where loading, service, and garage entrances are located on a street. So that's to note because we'll be looking a lot at that this evening. Okay, and then finally for public sidewalk frontages, we have the sector plan prescribes 18 to 22 foot width along Crystal Drive for commercial and mixed use. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Matt Matuzik, to look at the sector plan deviations.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is actually a great starting point that really the entire review process can be based on. Given everything you just heard, where does staff see any kind of deviations also in front of us to what the sector plan is anticipating in that particular block and on this site? So we wanted to do on the next two slides, give you a very robust and comprehensive summary of what our assessment is right now of that proposal, and then later on go into specific details of the key deviations we wanted to highlight for this discussion. Next slide. So I'm not going to read through all of these, particularly at that scale, but the ones in red are where the deviations occur. So you'll see a yes, Y in that third column. This slide, the open space deviation that we have, which is fairly minor. It's more of a size issue. There's obviously the intent of meeting the open space requirement. We do want to just verify that the sector plan anticipates a certain size, and can we make further evolutions to the design to make sure that this can still be achieved. And on the next slide, we have several other ones that deal with the transportation side of the equation, both from the loading, transit, and street network perspective. This is somewhat unique. I think if you've been participating in previous block plan reviews, the LRPC venue, I think, tries to do with Crystal City site plans. We don't have any other sites that make up this block. So Block W is really just this one site. So in some sense, we're having a conversation that at the same time could happen at the SPRC level. But nonetheless, beyond the requirements of conducting, reviewing, and approving a block plan here, we do want to make sure that if there are any fundamental issues we think should be addressed, that happens now so that when the SPRC process begins next, it could have a much better starting point. And maybe some of these items are much more in alignment between the county, the community, and the proposal. So we just want to kind of start that conversation and see where we go after this evening to make sure that the SPRC process is at a much better point. So the next couple of slides get into the specifics of some of these that we mentioned. We're not going to cover all of them because, as Chrissy mentioned, a lot of these are meant to be SPRC site specific, but the extent to which we can cover the more transportation and public space elements that typically do speak to the block level assessment, we did want to accomplish that tonight. So I'm going to cover the first one, which is the open space. And again, you can see the comparison, same exhibit we showed earlier with the planned open space and what is currently proposed with the application in front of us. Minor deviation in the total square footage of the area, given where the additional service road is introduced from Crystal Drive. And Sergio is going to cover the next couple of slides dealing with those transportation-related deviations.
Thanks, Matt. So the first deviation is about surface transit. The Crystal City Sector Plan calls for a transit stop along Crystal Drive, adjacent to the site. The applicant has not proposed a transit stop there. It's also not modifying or removing any existing stops along Crystal Drive and along its frontage. For surface or for street network, the applicant has proposed a service drive off of Crystal Drive that will tie into the existing service road that serves a number of buildings north of the site. This service road will be north of the building and south of the open space area. It will also tie into the tunnel that provides a connection under the CSX tracks. This service road is not envisioned in the sector plan, as you can see on the picture on the left. And lastly, the Crystal City Sector Plan calls for recommendations for loading and garage entrances to be on the eastern frontage of the site. The applicant has proposed its services to be on the southern frontage with access through a signalized intersection that's existing at Crystal Drive and 26th Street South.
Okay, and looking at the review process and schedule, so we're at LRPC meeting number 1 this evening. We have no future meetings scheduled. As I mentioned, determining on what consensus is made tonight by the LRPC might change this schedule. So we don't have anything else scheduled, but we look forward to hearing what you all have to say this evening, and that will guide the rest of the schedule for the project. So that concludes staff presentations. So we'll turn it over to the applicant team to present.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. As I mentioned, my name is Dolores. Thanks for having us this evening. I'm here with our design team and excited to talk about Block W's. I'm gonna go to the next slide. I think we'll probably have very similar images, Chrissy, in terms of the site context. So please bear with me. You'll be very well aware of what's going on by the end of this presentation. So as we mentioned, Block W is located on the southern end of Crystal City on Crystal Drive, north of 26th Street and south of 23rd Street. It contains essentially, as Matt mentioned, one development site within the block, as well as Crystal Park to the north. In terms of the aerial, what you'll see here is some of the current programming that's within the site. And we'll talk about each of these particular items in the next couple of slides and talk about the constraints and how we've dealt with those in our design. But on the right-hand side, you'll see the temporary park, the railroad underpass, the service road, and the existing gravel parking lot to kind of the east of the site along the train tracks. And then to the west, you'll see Crystal Drive and then the airport off-ramp, which is also an interesting component and constraint within the site to the south. Here we have some pictures of the site context. So similar to what staff mentioned, you have the corner from the highway, the southeast corner that you see there, currently kind of over our site. On the right-hand side, you see the south end off-ramp where our loading will be located, or we're proposing our loading to be located. You see the northwest corner where the temporary park is, and then the service road currently and the condition there. So we felt like this was an interesting layer of images across the site and showing where the sector plan really indicates the development site. One thing to note as we were studying the sector plan and are aware of what's in there is that this site actually is in between two sections of Crystal City. So the northern section of the entertainment section as well as the southern. So it's a unique position, not necessarily like some of our other sites that we have along the Crystal Drive corridor. And what you see in the third image is really the support or the intent that the ramp, the airport ramp, was never really there. So the support that it's not really designed to be part of the site. And then what you'll see on the right-hand side is the proposed development plan of our building fitting in within that site plan. So to talk about the airport ramp and the off-ramp and the process here. So we are in coordination right now with VDOT along with staff in terms of what that process will look like. Obviously, it's something that we need to highly coordinate and take very seriously in terms of bringing that down carefully and safely. So we are going through a design exception package right now with VDOT, working on what that design of the sidewalk will be. And then the permitting process will obviously be in coordination with staff if and when this gets approved. So talk about some of the constraints, the extent of the service lane. What you'll see here, and Sergio mentioned this, we do have a service and fire road that actually comes into our site and serves the 5 buildings north of us. So that's an existing condition that we currently have to deal with. And the way that we are proposing, including the service lane, it would allow us to keep this current path active while during construction. So another constraint that we have is this railroad underpass. It is one of the eastern constraints. It's an interesting one. It's one that JBG does not have the ability to totally omit. There are multiple parties that have rights that are protected for that underpass. So that's something that we have to take into consideration during the design phase. And so we have here, which we thought was helpful to showcase some of these constraints within the current site arrangement. And so what you'll see is talked about essentially the service road cutting through our site. You'll see the underpass in green, and then 2 other variables that we haven't really talked about, but we'll include in part of the next slides is the Pepco duck bank there that goes and feeds the airport. So that's an existing duck bank that we have to deal with. And then the railroad tracks and then the variable width and buffer within that. So making sure as CSX continues to develop their plans that we're cognizant and in coordination of that. So this is our proposed plan within the current constraints of the site. So really thinking through what is possible within this space. And the one thing we added here is the open space component. So if you go to the next slide, Carolina, what you'll see is the sector plan proposed site, kind of the illustrative nature of it, and where we have studied this quite a bit in terms of the service and the fire access and where, it was intended to be here. And so if you go to the next slide, if we overlay our current constraints within the site and then with the sector plan envision, you can see that it starts to get complicated with what's currently there today and what the sector plan actually envisioned. So in order to accommodate for the constraints and ensure that we are providing as much open space as possible, we actually are proposing that we push back our development or push to the south to ensure that we have the access to the open space, but also are able to clear some of those constraints that we have mentioned, in particular, that duck bank that we had talked about. So you can see with the current plan that we're proposing and the constraints where the site lays out. Here we have just a rendering of our building, really highlighting the open space and hugging that component of activity on the site. And it's a little hard to see here, but we heard staff on the comments of the open space not being enough. And so we're working on a revised proposal there to make sure that we do hit the 38. I think the good news is that we think that with the geometry of the northern component, we can probably include that as part of the easement and hit that 38,000. So should not be an issue from the open space perspective. So from a sector plan and site building design, our building program, we're proposing a 5/2 wood frame building. It's roughly 380,000 square feet with just shy of 4,000 in retail, 370 residential units. We're excited about the average size here being over 1,000. I think some of our other properties skew smaller, and so nice to see a different typology here that allows for different tenants. Building massing and placement does adhere with the sector plan in terms of height. We're at 85 within the 200 limit we talked about. Tower coverage is within the threshold of 85. We are on the mixed use target for land use, and retail is fronting, and we'll talk a little bit about retail, Crystal Drive, and it's in the northwest corner. And then finally, we have our 200 parking spots. That's roughly a 0.54 in parking ratio, and we have decided to put that kind of at the east side of our site to have the podium conceal the parking so that we can activate the street front. From a programming perspective, you'll see here a little bit of what I just talked about. We have retail in the corner of the northwest. Lobby is also fronting Crystal Drive, so we want to make sure that we get that activity on the sidewalks. We have residential walk-up units, really catering to that sense of community and active space on the ground level. And then just walking around the building, we have loading to the south and the parking entrance to the south as well. And then fitness to the north, showcasing probably our most active use within the building, really complementing that park on the other side. I think, and another thing to note here is we are going to be proposing some Pudo spots off of that service drive just to make sure that we are limiting some of that pedestrian conflict that could happen on Crystal Drive, not only with Ubers and such, but also with bikes. So I want to make sure that we're pointing that out. And then service and loading. So we believe that we are putting our loading in the best location for the site. Not only that, but we also took a reference from the sector plan that actually allows and suggests that we should put loading when possible near alleys. We have a pretty good condition here that allows us to hide some of this loading components right underneath the bridge that is to remain when we bring down the ramp. And so we believe we're meeting this in the spirit of the sector plan. And I think before we end, kind of wanted to walk you guys through the building. And I know this is more of an SPRC topic with architecture here, but we wanted to show what the building would look like as you walk around in the different perspectives. So from the northwest, our coordinated frontage, then we have the building entrance, that lobby activation that I talked about on Crystal Drive. Then on the bottom is a perspective from the east facade. So what you would see coming in from the bridge and then from the CXX train tracks, essentially the last picture right there. And lastly, I think what we wanted to leave you all with is we're excited about the plan. It's different in kind than what JBG has traditionally done. If you take a look at all of the entitlements that have happened in the past 2 years, it's mainly high-rise buildings on Crystal. So this really allows for a different type of housing opportunity for folks, different tenants and families alike. That's all we had.
Cool, thank you very much. We can move right into discussion. First topic will be open space, which of course includes park space, daycare area. So have at it, folks. Comments?
So if I'm understanding right, the revised proposal, there's now enough space to sort of meet in the sector plan requirements for that? Is that what you both?
the numbers seem to suggest that we don't have a chance of exactly
Okay,
property lines and.
but that's the intent is
Yes.
design.
Yeah, and obviously we still need to coordinate, right? Like we want to make sure that all the numbers are, but that is the intent is to make sure that that is met.
Yeah, because I think that in conjunction with some overall thoughts, I like this in concept. I just think that some of these edges have to be sanded. It what's in the plan, and obviously it's a little puzzle you all have
Yeah.
going on there, but I think that that's encouraging about the open space.
So this is truth to everybody. This is the very first planning meeting I've ever attended, so we found that I was supposed to come at 3 p.m. today, so bear with me here. Representing the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. We actually talked about this at a call that we had earlier today, so I'm just going to convey what we talked about. So the very first thing I was going to say was we have concerns that you're not going to meet the open space target, and I was very pleased to hear that you're going to be working to hit that. And we appreciate that. The county is just finishing work on a comprehensive forestry and natural resources plan. It's going to be approved by the county board on Saturday. And this is, I think, a restatement of the fact that our natural resources in Arlington are critically important, and also that they are in crisis right now. The data show that tree canopy coverage in the county has gone from around 40% to in the lower 30% range, just over a very relatively small period of time, 8 to 10 years. And so the message, a main message from my commission is the more trees you plant, the better, and the more open space you have, the better. I would encourage you to even go beyond the 38,000 foot amount, even though you're dealing with the puzzle of the site, in large part because you're making these into residences, presumably for some families. So having that open space, that green space for them and the other folks who live in that area of Crystal City, that neighborhood, is very important. As far as the trees go, in addition to the open space area, trees that you have around the perimeter, our standard request is that you make sure that there's enough space for the trees to eventually become mature and survive, and that the soil and area underground is sufficient for them to grow and survive.
Staff will make sure that we have all of the right tree pit
Those will be
calculations.
more detailed in this groups.
Yeah.
Just a couple other really quick points that came up today. Arlington is now a biophilic city. And so that includes maximizing green space, but also maximizing green spaces other than trees within development. And that includes green roofs. And I don't know if a green roof element is part of your plan, but if it's not, I would encourage you to have that be part of your thinking. One member of the commission on the call today who loves birds, as we all do, noted that this is in an area where there is bird migration. So the more that you deal with the glass surfaces to minimize bird collisions would be really appreciated. And I think that's the sum total of what I have in my notes here. I just one question for clarification. The tree buffer that now exists between the parking lot and the rail line, that's going, assuming looking at the plan. There's not going to be a tree buffer along that edge of the property, if I'm looking at it correctly.
Yeah.
I have to look at that, but I think actually many of those trees are in the existing CSX easement.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I imagine closer to the track, some of that will remain.
So just then to reiterate my message as a commissioner is that the more trees you have on this, happier we and citizens will be as well. You're helping the county deal with climate change impacts and with our declining tree canopy crisis. So thanks.
Sure.
Nick, thanks. One of my concerns is the open space for the daycare center, and that was addressed in one of Chrissy's slides. I'd rather see that covered ahead of time so that it's not a crisis that all of a sudden they don't have any place for it. Because daycare is a really important amenity, and it's something we want to keep there. And if that daycare center wants to stay, I'd hate to see them go away because they suddenly lose their outdoor space. Thanks.
I'm also glad to see that the open space is being proposed to be the full section plan recommendation. 3,100 square feet is a little bit smaller than a smaller sized kids soccer field. So it is a lot of space that we'd be potentially giving up. So I'm glad to see it coming back. I didn't quite catch, is that open space supposed to be used by the daycare or, and so it'll be kind of for part of the day, it's not open to the public, but then in the evening it would be open to the public again?
Yeah, so that's something that we coordinate, obviously, with the 10 Edge. They want to continue in that space. There is a 5-year renewal that they're currently executing. So it's a conversation, one that we're aware of, one of that they're also aware of in terms of how we would ensure that we bring them in early enough to, you know, meet that need. Currently, the playground is open, as you mentioned, to the public as well during non-operating hours. So we could obviously talk through that. I think the open space in general, we were showing a lot of the volleyball courts as the actual, you know, active plan on there, but it's something that we'll need to work with DPR on the programming and that process, obviously.
And just to confirm, the sector plan idea for this open space was for part of it to be semi-private.
It doesn't prescribe directly to either retain or relocate the childcare playground. It only identifies that there is an existing playground and that throughout the process of the park planning, county needs to determine what to do with that playground, whether it be retained or relocated.
Is the park area, including the daycare area, privately owned public space now, and presumably it'll remain that way? There'll be an public easement on it.
Yeah. Matt, do you want to talk about the actual status?
So for a term of 40 years, there had been a public access easement over that space. That was part of the initial approval for Crystal Parks dating back all the way to 1980. That easement expired, I believe, in 2020. But as part of this development, we'd be re-granting a new easement. And obviously, we still have work to do to coordinate the boundaries of that, what the terminology that's going to be, but it would be a privately owned land, but held open to the public with the.
We have a similar situation just a couple blocks from here. Everybody wants to look at it. The Bikini building behind it is a public area, which includes the daycare play area, which is similar to this. It's open, but it's to the public, but it's not being used by the off hours.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a similar setup.
Yeah.
You mentioned, mentioned about the trees along the CSX. Be aware those could very well come down because CSX, there'll probably be a 4th track added on that right away. So how that'll deal with configuration there and what'll survive and what won't, that happens. You just be aware that that's outside of the control of this particular process.
It's supposed to be on the east side.
Yeah. But there's a lot of,
Yeah.
2025, and that's what we heard as well, but.
A question and maybe a comment depending on the answer. The 33,000 X feet that you have there currently, does that include this kind of broad hardscape area that looks like it's part of the sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay, my recommendation then, my comment would be to replace most of that hardscape with lots of trees and greenery.
And again, I think that would go through the actual process
Yeah.
with DPR,
Yeah,
but yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
I have another question. Just south of the site, underneath the airport access overpass, is what is now effectively a little park area, sitting area, which somebody's maintaining. I know it's not part of the site. It's presuming that's VDOT right of way, but I don't know who deals with that. Because somebody is clearly maintaining it because it's not junky. You know, it's tried to be a public area.
Yes, it was the bid.
How that
You
works?
just want to bring up
Oh,
maybe
could
the
be.
aerial.
Yeah, we actually have some pictures of it as well. That we could show. Yeah. Yeah, and we know what you're talking about,
Yeah,
which is
there's
like right
walkways,
underneath.
there's-
Yeah, so that's to remain.
Like little bouldery
Mhm.
things to fill in the non-paved spaces.
Looks like the EPA, but like actually own the land,
I was wondering, yeah, it could be the office building to the south.
just on an AC. map,
Yeah.
so.
This is the Mike O'Hara from Bowler. That area underneath of the viaduct is part of the office building that was designed with the office building as the first building in Potomac Yard. Yes.
So it's a little dark, but you can see that there's definitely some structure underneath.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
it also is a stormwater management system. If you notice, there's depth to that, and that is a stormwater management system.
because it is public space. It is something that is open. Well, I walked it. It's actually
Yeah.
quite nice, even though it's underneath the highway. It's good. It's
They're in
definitely,
shade.
definitely.
That's good.
Trying to make the best of
Positive.
something that's really bad. So, it's a good amendment. It's good for, anyway, I just wanted to identify that that's there and how it fits into this. Okay.
All right, I'll piggyback on that and comment that I'm not sold on the loading dock location.
That'll come up a little bit later.
Okay, so I'm out of.
We'll, because I want to talk about that too.
Okay, are we focused on open space?
Yeah, right
then?
now we're still on open space.
All right, missed that. All right, thanks.
Hold the thought. I guess we can move on to transit now. Comments there, Pam.
Excuse me, but you have participants online.
Yeah.
I'm a commissioner as well. May I speak?
Yeah.
I'm
Identify who
Carol
you-
Fuller. I'm a commissioner on the Crystal and Pentagon Cities Council, Citizens Council. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, great. So you're a substitute, right?
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fine. I have two comments on open space. First of all, I'm very pleased to hear that the applicant says they're going to try to meet that open space requirement. But I want to make it clear that the CPCC is about to send a letter to the county with its revised priorities. And one of those is on open space. And meeting the priorities, meeting the sector plan is fine. But we say we need to have a lot more open space because things are not moving quickly. And there is very, very little open space in Crystal City that does not belong to the developers. So keeping that in mind, that just meeting that level is really just barely like saying going to silver on leads these days, rather than going to gold and going to platinum. The second comment is just a reminder, and this is more for the SPRC process, I realize, but just a reminder that JBG made an offer on open space some time ago about the possibility of creating a trail on the other side of the CSX railroad tracks from its parcel that's just east of this development site going up to Roach's Run. So when we get into the SPRC, it's an opportunity for creating more open space that matches what the commissioner from forestry said earlier, is that we really need to have more natural spaces. We need to have more trees. So just those two comments from the CPCC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then now we can move on to transit. So, Pam.
I was going to open space. I was going to say what Carol said. So I'm
Okay.
glad that she said it.
Okay.
Another.
Is there another hand up?
And who else is hand up?
Hi, yeah, this is Tarcy Dunlop from the Crystal City Civic Association. And I just wanted to appreciate those in the room and Carol online who've put out concerns about open space. We are very much concerned about, although appreciate the desire to align with the sector plan. There's a lot of developed space in Crystal City and there's not a lot of open space. And so just anything to go above and beyond would be greatly appreciated, including the trail consideration for the SPRC. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody else. Okay, now we can move on. We have any comments on?
Yeah. So I think this is transportation, because the staff talked a little bit about the building-based to building-based dimension, which directly interacts with street width. And I was wondering if staff feels that the amount of street width being provided here is consistent with the sector plan, because there are kind of two cross sections given in the sector plan, one north of 23rd, one south of 26th, and this is in between. But this is narrower than either of them. And I'm just a little, the 98 feet is like, you can go 98 feet if it's a pinch point, but it looks to me like this is 98 feet, the entire length of the building. which seems like less of a pinch point and more of a, we've just decided this is going to be 98 feet wide. So I wonder if the staff has any comments about whether this is an appropriate amount of like curb to curb street width for Crystal Drive here.
I can jump in first, just saying, I acknowledge your comment. You are correct that we didn't plan to discuss at SPRC that the build 2 lines in the building form. And you're right that I think one of the big questions during SPRC will be whether the full frontage of Block W is considered a pinch point, because it's not quite clear in the sector plan. So I'll leave it at that. But again, it wasn't really up for discussion tonight, but I agree it does kind of play into other aspects of the sector plan recommendations.
I feel like curb to curb width, whether that meets the sector plan should be a block plan conversation. And I'm just, we've been working since the sector plan to make some other transportation improvements in Crystal City, including the Crystal City Bike Network. We've been working through a lot of other developments to try and protect the bike lane on Crystal Drive so that we don't have cars just parking in it. And it doesn't look to me like this provides enough right of way for in order to do that. And looking at the Crystal City sector plan, the building right across the street is one of those marked likely to remain and not redevelop. So this appears to be our only shot to make sure that we have a Crystal Drive that's wide enough to work for everybody. So I will flag that as a concern for SPRC, I guess. I will say, I think not putting an additional bus stop on Block W is totally reasonable. It's 1/3 of a mile from between the two existing bus stops, which for premium transit is pretty typical. The more times you stop, the slower the trip is for everybody. So I don't have any concerns with not meeting that portion of the sector plan. I too am very interested in the Potomac Yard Trail that JBG has talked about in the past and committed to as part of the People for Cars Coalition. I'm concerned that this development is currently laid out prevents that from ever being a possibility. So that's something that I would also love to talk about more going forward. I will leave it at that for now. 2 minds on the loading, so I can just leave off for now.
Yeah, I had a suggestion about potential bus stop there too, because for Metroway, south of this, it's one of the in a shed stops. It's a pretty big deal infrastructure there. So, and since the southbound Metroway route on this street is only provisional until the street network gets built out to the west, it would seem to make no sense to spend a lot of money on a Metroway stop here. Because it's not ready yet. So, I agree, unless there's some change in demand right there. And as I said, I've walked this site, it's quiet there. It's really, and given how, actually, this is a small apartment building that's gonna go here. You're not even adding huge numbers of people. This could have been a 20-story building. It's gonna be 7, so it's only have maybe a third of the number of people it otherwise would have had on the site. So there doesn't seem to be a huge call to have a bus stop here. So I concur with Chair Slide here on the Metroway. Yes.
Okay,
Ben, hi.
and thank you, Chris, for your comments. Always, they're wonderful. My main concern about the street network is removing a section of the service road, because, and I'm over there all the time. I love that area. It's wonderful. There's really heavy traffic on the service road a lot of the time. And I unfortunately, and I apologize, did not get a chance to read it, the MMTA today. I found it, but I didn't read it. But every time I'm over there, there's tons of vehicles coming, and they get to come out at the corner with the traffic light. I worry about how, and that I assume the traffic on the service road is not going to go away. I mean, that is what it's designed to do, and they seem to all come out at the south end. I think it's a 2-way street, but I think they come out, they start to the north and go to the south.
They go, so there is a north exit.
Yeah, but that one's tricky too. Because it's not right at the traffic light, and they have a hard time pulling out. So now the service road is going to kind of go right in front of the building. It's going to conflict with
stuff going on by the building. And then when you get to Crystal Drive, those vehicles are gonna wanna go left or right. And some of them would like to go straight down 26th Street. And unless you have a traffic light there, I don't know how they're gonna do it. So those are my concerns. And you know, it's gonna be problems for pedestrians and cyclists and drivers who are already on Crystal Drive.
Yeah, I think those are good points about how it would actually work coming out there, that would be a T intersection. Now, the advantage of a T intersection slows traffic down, because my take on it was right now, traffic to the service road just can zoom up Crystal Drive and just peel right off. It's like an exit ramp. So nothing's going to slow down by getting on it. If you make it a T, everybody has to really slow down and make it a conscious turn, which is, I think, safer for pedestrians and bicyclists too, other than the way that ramp is now. So how that would actually operate, the traffic light might make sense, or right in, right out only, maybe, is what you need to do there too. There's probably a number of ways that it could be done, so I think that will also be an SBRC discussion.
Yeah.
But you're right, the service road can't go away.
Right.
It's,
And it's missing. Yeah.
It's used, I can see it's used a lot.
Thank you.
Follow up on that question. Did you study extending the service road to 26th? That not work, or what was your analysis?
Did you have the most straighter?
Yeah, I mean, so we did study the service road going through the back. I mean, this building as designed doesn't function with that service road. There's been a couple ideas, I guess, to go through the building. I don't know if the fire department would want to drive the fire truck underneath the building. One of the reasons why we did put it on the north side, you know, there's obviously the diagram of the park, Crystal Park, that illustrates the service that side, but also to have continuous operation for fire service and delivery for all 5 of those Crystal Drive office. You know, that's important to be used, et cetera, et cetera. So we thought it's vital that it comes out of the north side of the building. But in terms of like bringing it through the building, I mean, the 2 options, right, to bring it through, but we don't think the fire trucks through the building. And then the other option would be to, you know, you'd have to like create a lane, and then the building is completely different.
And I will just point out that staff's preference throughout our review of the site plan is to have the connection to the south of the site going around the eastern side of the building.
Fire department's okay with not having access back there, or do they feel they can get onto the CSX right away for fire access?
We're not sure. I think the main concern was if the building was cantilevered, which is what you all studied, right? If there's a large overhang on the upper levels, but there was still the service road routed on the ground level around ground level. But I don't think we've studied if fire would have an issue with the whole building they'd have to push back the building in order to do the service road fully through there. So we haven't studied too far into that. We haven't connected with fire, but it is.
Yeah, that's going to be that's a big deal. Fire department really needs to be talked to earlier rather than later, because if they don't have access to the CSX right away, that entire side of the building, which is fairly long, will have no fire access.
Yeah, right now, we have had those preliminary conversations with this building, and the building functions from fire access in, you know, on the south side of the fire, the service lane. They have access along the back. There's a buffer. There's space between the CSX and the back of the building. Fire can get.
There's enough space that way.
There's enough.
Yeah, it seems like we'll have a fence.
Yeah, we'll need a fence. Yeah, along so people can just jump into this.
Okay, so there would still be a 12 foot, 12 feet, 15 feet between.
I can't remember the exact dimension.
Okay, so that could also presumably be a pedestrian way too, because you can't have trees back there either. If you have a fire truck being able to go along it, you can actually have a trail back there.
You could. I mean, there's a walkway. There's enough dimensions for the fire.
Yeah. Yeah, these are design issues I think we definitely want to talk about further at SBRC. Street network, and of course the tunnel is nothing that can be changed, is that correct?
there are multiple parties that have access to that, and so we have to maintain that.
And I presume that wasn't something that's considered with the sector plan that was created.
We did not find it in the sector plan,
Yeah,
in
nobody
terms of
saw
its
the license.
existence, but
I don't think we want to do anything to eliminate access to the Crescent parcel across the tracks, so. But no, the sector plan is.
Just make a quick comment that I think I support the fire lane not going along the east side of the building, south as the drawing shows. Just because I think there's a little less paving when it's all said and done, right? So I think that's probably a net gain.
Yeah, anything further on this? No, I take it everybody's happy with the ramp coming down. I figured that should be a given, but wanted to confirm that nobody is planning to.
And on that question, what will the traffic impacts be onto Route 1? How much traffic is being shifted onto Route 1? And how many people who used to go down Crystal Drive and take a left and go up 18th or 15th will go southbound on Route 1 through McDonald's and through our neighborhood? That's one of our concerns.
Rip Slade, do you want to address that? Because I know we have.
Yeah.
council.
Yes, we're looking at the ramp removal volumes. We've got a scenario in the study that looks at output project, but with the ramp removal. So it doesn't, the ramp removal doesn't really impact anyone if it's southbound. That ramp remains. It's really just the ramp that goes northbound and across. And then, as you said, those volumes would shift over to Route 1. So we are studying that a little bit further. Right now, it's about 200 trips that we should double shift over there. It doesn't really have impacts on the Route 123rd Street intersection. We did see some impacts with people that would have continued north on Crystal Drive and now are on Route 1, thinking right and thinking left to go on Crystal Drive. So we're looking at some mitigations at Crystal Drive and third intersection. But we didn't really see any impacts there. We are studying that section where the ramp comes down into Route 1, kind of that section between bottom of the ramp and the 23rd Street.
We have traffic counts for it?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because when I was there, there really were a lot of cars coming down that ramp.
Yeah. Eight per
Yes.
day,
Yeah, that's just really in the morning.
morning people.
Well, morning and afternoon, yeah.
So that's
yes.
200.
Sorry, no, 200 in the morning and another
Got
200 in the afternoon. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a lot of cars.
Just a quick clarification.
Yeah, so
Is that 200 cars per day, your car count?
No, that was just 200 in the morning peak hour and then
Okay.
200, maybe 225, I think is that the actual number. Yeah.
okay, good. So are we done with transit and street network? Okay, great. Now we can move on to parking and loading. So, who's there?
Hi, Jeremy Olmack with Crystal City Civic Association. I had one comment about pedestrian usage of the ramp. Have you studied the impact to how taking that ramp down is going to affect pedestrians and cyclists that use that as a way to get to the airport?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's treacherous, but we do it.
Yeah, it's not a fun walk, but there is a sidewalk there.
Walk at your own
Oh,
risk,
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about?
A bit, yeah, I think, again, there is still the access at the other ramp that meets Route 1. I think it's a pretty narrow section of sidewalk there. So that is something that we've been studying. But yeah, because there is still that access at the other kind of supplemental ramp.
So the one thing I'll add to what Felice is mentioning is our proposal with VDOT is to actually have the two through lanes take a little bit of a diet. And so that it allows for additional space on the sidewalk so that we are creating a better condition for the pedestrians and meeting ADA because the current ones are not great. So
When CC to DCA is built, would people really just gravitate to that rather than walk?
Yes.
I would think so, but we want to maintain the accessibility there.
Okay. Anything further from Crystal City? Your hand is still up, that's all. Okay, since we move on parking loading frontage, Commissioner Sarli, it's time for your question.
Great. So keeping in mind that this is not SPRC. All the same, I think even some of your 3D illustrations demonstrate how that loading garage is going to open onto what is a reasonably decent public space, with that little well-conserved little area under the bridge. And it has pretty high, long sight lines. So coming up Crystal Drive, I think you would see that pretty far out. So I was just wondering if it's possible to put that on the sort of northeast corner. And sort of, I think there's a service elevator there. I mean, again, I don't want to get into the logistics of SPRC, but I think that would create a little bit more of a sort of wraparound and push the back of house back, towards the tracks. And I think it makes sense. I think also, I'm not super aware of how the service and the rail underpass access get used, but it seems like if it's reasonably light use, it wouldn't have too much of a conflict with the loading bay. And it would, allow the wraparound sort of, of the commercial facade. So that sort of was my question. Flash comment. Guess there's not much of a question there. All right, comment.
I was wondering about that loading dock too, but the converse to that is, and this is going to sound a little weird, but the loading dock being used, that's activity. It's literally eyes on that public area underneath the overpass. Now, residential loading docks aren't used a lot, so I get that. But nonetheless, it is activity, and it's not great activity, but it's still people using it, which could create a little more feeling of safety. Right now, it's actually fairly open. It's all open space going all the way up to that next building. This might make that space underneath the overpass feel a little more hemmed in once the building is built. I don't know what else would be used or would happen along that south facade of the building.
Well, you could wrap the residential, as the plan stands now, admittedly, it might change, but you could wrap the residential and make that a little bit more of a residential.
That
phase,
could work too.
And then that would have a little bit more light spill.
That could work too. There
onto
are
the
at least one unit
garden.
on the south end there, but I don't know how deep that goes. But yeah, I definitely want to have something to make that active.
And to that point, I think the northeast corner, I mean, due to the service road and the rail underpass access, it's just going to be sort of a throwaway almost. Like you're not going to have good urban vibe no matter what you do, right? You can plant 27,000 trees there. Well, that wouldn't work. So, so I think, as far as still capturing a little bit of urban gesture and quality, I think you can where the loading dock is now. And I think, it sort of has a certain back of house affinity, not to say sort of the negative term, but like we have to put it somewhere, right? Admittedly. So I think like we already have a little bit of a throwaway piece. So let's put the loading dock there, and that would create a little bit of activity, like you said, that I think it's going to be really difficult for the business. And I think you commented that the fitness related to the park. I agree. I think that's a good thing. But I think the angle of the rail underpass access and all that, like, and even the building already sort of picks up on that angle. So I think, that's going to become a real sort of continental divide feel almost. Like anything beyond that's going to feel a little bit dark.
Yeah, I can see because the retail space would be side of the building too.
Right. And that's what I think. Well, that's a fitness, so I don't know how much fitness needs frontage, but I think, the viability of a business in that area becomes a little bit questionable. Whereas I think on the loading dock is a little bit more desirable, whatever ends up being there. Again, LRPC level.
Makes sense. Commissioner Scott?
All right. We talked about it. I've had a chance to form a final opinion. I think I'm actually happy with the loading down on the south end. I'm really loath to put any additional traffic going what is essentially through the open space that we're getting. As Commissioner Hines Van Hines beautifully pointed out, there's already a fair amount of traffic on that service road. And I'm not sure I really want to add any additional major stuff to that, whether that's loading or parking entrance or anything like that. And I think I agree, removing as much building as would need to be removed to run the service road behind it is a bit off-putting, given that we've already dropped down to a 7-story building. So I think loading on the south side is a very reasonable approach. I do wonder when we get at SPRC, if it can't maybe scooch closer to the parking entrance so that it's not as visible as from somebody kind of driving. But that's more of an SPRC conversation.
Just to back and interject, because rerouting that service road then to north between the park and the future building, the proposed building, it will take all of the service and loading activities from the buildings to the north. They can still use that service lane right by the park.
That's a good point. Excellent point.
I guess for what it's worth, I would second your comment. I certainly understand the rationale of moving the loading docks up there and having everything kind of drive in that way. But south side is also facing an overpass.
Mhm.
And so, yes, there's area under there that people use, but it's not exactly a park. And I want to emphasize that it's open space. The word I like is park. It's a park. So let's keep it as park-like as possible. It's my request. And minimize the impact of the service road and railroad underpass as you're going to try to do. And if you want to put in 1,000 trees, that would be great with me.
Only 7,000.
A little bit.
Of course, that even.
Yeah.
Another reason for keeping the load on the south side is the traffic light. And that's also good parking in the building. It's gonna be much easier for all those vehicles to get in and out more safely.
Yeah. Sake of brevity, I'm just. Commissioner Simon. Encapsulated. Perfectly.
Okay, any further comments? Now, we have parking on this. What is parking usually is the SPRC? Is there anything particular parking that qualified?
They're just lumped together in the sector plan, so it
Okay,
looks,
so we'll
yeah,
leave that
it
alone.
speaks to
Nothing to do with
loading.
parking. Taking that off the table. So talking about the loading frontage. You can hold that to Do we have any other comments, either at the table or online, for any of these 4 topics? Mr. Peterson,
Well, is pickup drop off?
that's his PRC.
Okay.
Sector plan doesn't speak to it. They're proposing it on the northern service road.
And is that realistic? Or are people just gonna stop on Crystal Drive?
That we haven't looked at. Hidden for SPRC.
Okay, any other comments? Yeah.
Can I add to Tammy's comment that the main entrance to the building is on Crystal Drive, but you have no Pudo right there. There's gonna be, right, and did I see this very long entrance
So we
to
can pull it back up.
the service road or access road from the building?
Yeah. Give us one.
So-
I'll pull it up so we.
So people are going to want to be dropped off on Crystal Drive. I think that's a thing to think about.
We'll presumably be getting traffic counts for that part of Crystal Drive. Because it's the quieter end. Not, I was actually surprised how quiet that end of Crystal Drive is compared to just like 3 full blocks north.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really active all the time. Drops. This part. Parking spaces on the street.
It's almost like an open city.
Just that was pretty big.
But people-
Definitely, being a building here is a nice thing to do. Anyway, any other comments for tonight?
Are we gonna talk about the architectural feature?
No, that's conspiracy.
Yeah, but it's, if it's called for in the section plan and they are not planning to do an architectural feature.
No, that's design. That really becomes conspiracy. We will definitely be, we haven't, when we've had buildings in different other blocks, we've had lots of time on architecture pages. It is definitely a big topic. Anything else? If we don't have anything else, do we have any public speakers? There's a topic in the chat.
Yeah, but I put a call out.
Okay, because you have like 30 seconds if you want your public. Put yourself on the chat. Okay, it strikes me that we pretty much, we have areas we definitely want to be talking about a lot more at SBRC. I think we have a relatively decent consensus that we don't have to have another LRPC, that things that still need to be hammered out can be dealt with and will be dealt with. Is that a fair comment?
That's
Can I do a
Yes,
quick
Commissioner
recap?
Scarlett.
This is pretty much a straight up residential use, right? And that's okay with the sector plan?
Yeah.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah, like I said, my only thing on this is like, you're leaving a lot of density on the table, but that's the owner's choice.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen a 20-story building here. It's in a great spot for it. But again, I'm not the owner of the building. So.
Is there a reason that you're leaving the density on the table, considering like the Council of Governments is saying we need all of this extra housing in the next few decades? And so it seems like the demand is going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good comment and one that we've explored. Obviously, there's a couple of things that throughout our portfolio, the last 7 buildings that we will be putting up and have gotten approval are high-rise buildings. And so we are trying to make sure that there are different types of this that folks can actually, everyone can live here. And these are larger units. They're typically 2 to 3 bedrooms, more family oriented. And so that's the rationale for.
Just observing, this is the second GBG project that's leaving density on the table. And we just saw that with River House.
And
Just saying.
And one question that's for SPRC, but even though it is a 5/2, it will be of the usual quality that JBG builds, not a standard 5/2.
Correct.
Okay.
We will be managing building. That's
Not to sound like a one-trick pony, but I am. I would say that I certainly wouldn't object. All around Arlington, there's places where I scratch my chin and think, well, maybe that's too high. But here, if there's the opportunity to go higher and create more open space around it and make it really a green enclave, I would certainly welcome you thinking about that. Sure, you've thought about that a lot, but I think the county would thank you.
Okay, any final comments? Otherwise, I'll declare our meeting ended. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Yeah, we may be having a walking tour at some point. I'm going to be able to test DRCs, but we will not be having another one. Thank you all for coming out tonight.
We won't lead the walking tour. So. Anything?
Ban on the viaduct.
Have hot chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah. You set the bar high.